during that time. And some people say, how is Larry so successful? What's the key to his success? And most people say it's because he's authentic. And Larry has even said to me, you know, God forbid that a news anchor act like a normal human being. So Larry tonight is going to show us some of his favorite clips from Backstory, his WGN show. And then he'll tell us a little bit about his career, which started in a small town in Texas. And for a New England native in the middle of Texas making $5 an hour, I'm sure there's some interesting tidbits there. So anyway, Larry, take it away.
Thank you. He's Backstory. They weren't just reporters, photographers, singing in a small, quiet town. Halloween, 1928. On the morning of the 30th, a hooked neck was discovered in the furnace room of the village hall, naked and badly burned, very hard. This backstory features the real version that came up with Mickey and how he messed out on his business fortune. Mickey Mouse may be the biggest paradox in pop culture. Love him, but like Onwentsia Brian, nothing about it. Mickey Mouse, not that funny, not that exciting. Why do we love Mickey Mouse? That's what I think of the project is. I've seen maybe 1.5 Mickey Mouse films in my lifetime, but Mickey Mouse was the world's most popular fictional character, and most of you guys probably felt the same way. You know, you don't really watch Mickey Mouse cartoons. How did we get there? The French creators were inspired by the American Revolution and the abolition of slavery, symbolized more specifically by a broken chain. Do you see it? Probably not. The link lies at her right foot and is hidden beneath her gown. It reappears in front of her left foot. But for African Americans, the broken chain was not the end of oppression. Lady Liberty was hardly an inspiration for them in 1886. I had no idea the Statue of Liberty was tied to the issue of African Americans. Her mission: solve a mystery in this rare Shakespeare volume from 1623, which leads us to the most mysterious part of her event. Bacon believed Bacon was the real author of Shakespeare's plays. The writings included messages from Bacon, written in code.
So we got a team of people together to work on code breaking, study those texts, and hidden messages.
And as crazy as that sounds, that's really how the national security agency was. 40,000 photographs of the turn century let us peek into a mysterious culture that we're not supposed to see. The five Cotton brothers of Boston all went to Harvard and on to successful careers, including the youngest, Bobby, who was a member of the secret porcelain club at Harvard. Poet, novelist, lawyer, banker, brigadier general, political operative, a high intellect with a low profile, earned him the nickname the Mystery Man. The many faces of Bill Cresta. Usually you didn't see him coming or going. He stole millions, and nobody knew until now. He's Backstory.
So that was from season 1.
which was the fall of 2018. You may have recognized the Lake Bluff story there at the beginning, Elfrida Knack, a couple of stories from Boston. We've traveled around a little bit. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this show is because I love history, and that's how I got into journalism, the first draft of history. But also because every time I would go to the History Channel to look for history, they'd be doing Hitler's UFOs or some crazy thing like that. I wanted to just do real history. So I've done everything from the Rolling Stones to the Salem witch trials, and everybody, even people who say they like history, maybe they can give you 1 or 2 lines from a Wikipedia page on the Salem witch trials. And so I went just dug a little deeper, and it's fun. And it's for people who don't have time to watch a 2-hour documentary on Benjamin Franklin. This is a 10-minute sort of mini documentary, which in my world is an eternity. To think that 10 minutes is a long time to tell a story, but it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a learning curve for me, just when I thought I knew it all in this business, to put together a 10-minute story. So we just finished up our last new piece, which actually runs again tonight at 11 on WGN, which is my the history of baseball cards. And a woman who was a pioneering stunt woman from Indiana, and even the historian in her own hometown had never heard of her. And she broke a record, and that her descendants replicated. So it was a really kind of an interesting story. So yeah, history and English kind of got me into the news world, and I wanted to talk about answer some of the questions that I get, no matter what, whether I'm at the Moose Lodge or the high school, or sadly, even journalism students really struggle with understanding what journalism is. So the questions I get about why is news so bad, why is it so biased, things of that nature. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And as I arrived here, I realized I forgot my reading glasses. So instead of being super cool, I'm going to have to go like this every once in a while, just to kind of to look at my notes. I may be, yeah, sure. It's kind of a new concept for me. So, starting out in journalism is kind of like minor league baseball. You go single A, go double A, go triple A. So I went to Longview, Texas, $5 an hour, did everything, shoot, got a big backpack, and shooting and editing and anchoring, and $5 an hour. And I had never been west of Massachusetts. I had never been on an airplane, and was out on a story and ran into the county constable. And I said, excuse, and of course looked like the Marlboro Man, and said, "Excuse me, sir, what does the county constable do?" And he said, "Son, as long as I'm in this county, whatever the hell I want." And I had no doubt that was accurate. And bounced around, and my double A was Evansville, Indiana, and my triple A was Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I've gotten to actually fly a fighter jet upside down over Tulsa. I'm not sure if it technically was a fighter jet that could actually, drop a bomb, but it was the Canadian Snowbirds, their version of the Blue Angels. And they probably don't do this today, but I used to ride along with the police, and I've been in a crack house for drug stings. And I went to firefighter school, and they had me wear the firefighter gear and get into this shed, and then they set it on fire. So the camera guy is through a little hole, and I said, "Listen, we're getting this on one take, I guarantee it." And I got in there, and oh my God, people complain about firefighters, and oh my gosh, they sit around all day, they play cards, and they make chili. Listen, if you have to go into a house fire once, you have earned your pension. Never again. I've interviewed a few presidents before they were president, which would be George W. Bush when he was GM of the Texas Rangers, Obama, of course, and Mr. Trump on the telephone. So it's fun. It's different every day. It's fun, and it's an everyday learning experience, which is what I like about it. So one of the things that journalism, I'll tell this through the eyes of a journalism student, they think news is going to something and literally just covering the event and taking a shovel and just shoveling it along to you at home. And that's not what it is. That's C-SPAN. And if you've ever watched C-SPAN, it's boring as hell. And it's complicated. I mean, this is complicated stuff. And it takes somebody who is there every day to understand it and make sense of it. So what journalism students struggle with is they can't figure out what the story is. Not every story is a house fire. And I really think there should be a class called critical thinking. You know, I know that there usually isn't one in high school. Yeah, you can take philosophy class in college and stuff, but they really struggle with critical thinking skills. And that's the one thing that I try to sit down with them and try to explain to them so that they're not wasting their time in journalism school. News is what's new. It's right there in the word. News is what's new. It's what's unique. It's what is the problem? What is the solution? And the most important that this kind of goes over their head, what person in a position of power is contributing to that problem or solution? Challenging authority, that is what our role is, not to shovel stuff at you, shovel facts at you. And so this is where the bias problem comes in, is that if I'm interviewing, let's say, a Democrat, I'm going to ask him questions like a Republican, and vice versa, if I'm doing my job, and vice versa. The problem is people only see me on that one day and then they get upset. You know, I say, listen, I'm not at a cocktail party. Like, this is my job. If I'm not challenging you on your position, I might as well just hand you the microphone and leave. What am I doing here? Right? And so the issue isn't bias. Human beings are biased. All human beings are biased. My job is to challenge you and to be fair. And I would ask people to judge me on the body of my work, not on the 3-minute interview you saw on that particular day. Because if I'm sitting with a Democrat, I'm going to hammer you with Republican questions and vice versa. So, you know, judge me on my body of work. And while people may see that as negative, I see it as a positive, because the people in Russia, when they're getting their news, they're not getting any bad news. It's all good. And so, you know, I bite my tongue when I'm at a cocktail party and people say, oh, I never watch the news, it's so negative. How do you participate in your democracy if you don't know what's going on? Because I know everybody has opinions, but your opinions are only as good as your facts. And this brings me to misinformation. And so if I had a nickel for every time, and not, this is even educated people from Lake Forest who send me an email and say, well, what about this? Like, oh yeah, I know where you got that. You got that off of Facebook. And oh yes, I've seen this chain email that goes around. I know where you got that. And there'll be a shred of truth in it, but it's not truthful. And this is the problem of context and perspective. And this is what happens in the primetime cable talk shows. I tell people, that's not news, that's an entertainment show about the news. So you're watching Fox, you're watching MSNBC. So you can check the box and say, okay, that was factual, and the same over here, but you don't have the full context. You know, what they're doing is cherry picking, but you're not going to know that if all you do is consume your information from the New York Times editorial page or the Wall Street Journal editorial page. I read both because I'm a journalist and that's my job, but I would do it anyway because I think it's a better critical thinking exercise than to simply seek out and consume information that makes you feel good. Because whatever side you're on, you're not always right, right? You know, and some things are just value-based and you have to be able to make that distinction. So, you know, and I think the media has not done a good job of managing that. I mean, should they put Fox News when they're doing their talk shows? Should they put CNN when Don Lemon's talking about whatever Don Lemon's talking about? And if I'm a reporter at CNN, I really don't care what Don Lemon's saying. It has no impact on what I'm doing or how I cover a story. Same if you're a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Whatever their editorial page is saying, that is not filtering down to you and affecting how you're covering the news. All right, can I say? Yeah, so I'm sorry, I really can't read it. So that's what I always suggest to people is that no news segment is supposed to be the first or last word
on whatever it is you're trying to inform yourselves on. There are lots of books out there, and to read different things. And please ignore things on Facebook and chain emails, because when you are spreading those, you are spreading a virus of disinformation, and it is not productive. So with that, maybe I'll open up and answer some questions if you have any. Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Powerful remarks. My question was about sort of the economics of news
Mm-hmm.
and whether you've seen it change. I had a conversation with a guy who told me he was paid by the click, so that his compensation was actually
Yeah.
enhanced by how other people clicked on the headline. But I suppose that's always been true, right? Selling newspapers and tabloids and so on. So I was just curious whether you feel like the kind of instant voting that social media has created has made that worse, or it's the same, or how much is
Yeah.
all effective for other people?
It's a really big question, and the powers that be in my business have certainly not figured it out. Digital is a bunch of kids at a card table in a dark corner behind the desk, and they'll just say, post stuff, just post it, get some clicks, post it. Then we just have not figured it out. And yeah, we have a segment called Trending. What's trending out there? It may not be important, but obviously it's a sexy story that people like. And so that will end up in our newscast. But you know, that old saying of it bleeds, it leads. The reason you're putting murder stories, all these murder stories in there is, in some ways, it's easy to cover in a sense, and you can always defend the decision to cover a murder, but it has to be put in context. I had this debate with a reporter who was talking about, we're not covering, Inglewood enough. I said, are you kidding me? It's in the news every single day. And I said, listen, if someone gets murdered in Lake Forest, you say, oh my God, because it never happens. And again, news is what's unique. But my argument was, the value of somebody's life is not relative to how much coverage they get in local news. So I don't think we're being sensationalistic, any more sensationalistic. We got that criticism during 9/11, and I said, are you kidding me? You couldn't make that up. If you made a movie about 9/11, nobody would believe it. Like, it's sensationalistic based on what it is. So it hurts our business in the sense that it used to be, oh my God, the 10 o'clock news, that was it. And now it's not just the kids, all of us, we're looking at our phones all day. By the end of the day, a lot of us have a sense of what the news headlines are. And so the evening news maybe has become less important. Where in the morning, you got to run around, you got to get ready for work. So I'm the best background noise ever. And I'm happy to be that for you. It's hurt, numbers have come down as they did when cable was introduced. Numbers have come down as the computer was introduced. Numbers have come down as the cell phone was introduced and social media. So yeah, we have to compete with those things. And we're still trying to figure that out. I wish I had a better answer than that. Fortunately, I'm limping to the finish line here. Yes.
I think we have a perception that the news is much more polarized than it used to be, where the country is much more polarized. And I'm not sure that's so.
Mhm.
Yeah, if that's a story in itself,
Yeah.
then that becomes the news in itself. But what is your perception of whether it's based on the internet or based on Facebook or what have you? Are we in fact more so than we've ever been?
Well, I think the combination of the cable news talk show and social media have enabled that, because when I was a kid, were my parents sitting around reading the Wall Street Journal? No. Or the New York Times? I mean, certainly there's a segment of the audience that did. But now the average person can go on primetime cable and get their talking points from left or from right. And then they can put it on social media and spread it around like they're some kind of political expert because they've grabbed some quote from this guy or that woman. And it just fuels that fire. And so it does seem polarized. But I think, you know, I don't think when I was a kid that people were doing their homework to read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and so on. Now it's easy. Click on the TV, somebody's giving you nice little sound bites for left or for right. Go on Facebook and tell all your friends as if they care. Let me tell you, they don't. I'm telling you at home. They don't. So yeah, it's sad, and I don't think it's been helpful or productive, and I hope it kind of peters out on it. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, just want to get your opinion on the whole, what's going on with Twitter right now. They have a censorship problem, and just want to get your take.
It is a hard problem because if you're taking a position, and I'm not a business person, so if that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I'm not a business person, so I'm never in a position to make those. But I think, and this doesn't necessarily relate to Twitter, but when you have people tweeting out and putting on Facebook things that are clearly wrong, that's a problem without getting down that political road. And people do things in a mob that they would never do otherwise. That was true before social media, right? In real time, right? Yes.
I watched today on CNN a show that was about the media, which was fascinating.
Yeah.
And there's a man who's written for The Atlantic, which Obama quoted, I guess, in the Stanford talk that he gave about the damage that social media has done to us as a democracy. And he said the only hope is that we're exhausted, that they're finding that the population is exhausted by all the conversation. Have you seen any sign of people?
I do. Yeah. I've seen people getting off of Facebook and social media. I would if I didn't have to be for my work. And I've blocked a lot of people, not because of their opinions, just because they've been nasty about it. And so if Twitter starts hammering a particular group, then somebody else can come up with their own version of Twitter and get those people, if that's what they want. The marketplace will bear that out, I suppose. Yeah. Yes.
I'm curious, as a young journalist coming into this field, did you have a mentor? And are there words of wisdom he or she shared with you as a, upcoming journalist that you still hold true in your own heart?
Yeah, I have mentors, and not people who are famous that anybody in this room would know. But the one thing that I think I was good at, maybe out of desperation, and this applies to anybody in any business, is to get critical feedback on your work. And we tend to be sensitive about, especially in TV, and you think, you put this story together, you send it to your mom, and she says it's fantastic. Like, show it to somebody who knows what they're talking about. And if you're 22 years old and someone's telling you you're awesome, you better get another opinion, because nobody's hitting it out of the park at 22, 23, 24. And so I think that's helpful. I would always take my work to my boss, or in the case of when I was in Longview, Texas, I was at this little station that went into bankruptcy, and it was not a good situation. And I made friends with people at the #1 station in town, and they would look at my work. And I got out of Longview, Texas, was not a victim of their bankruptcy and getting fired. So I think you just have to get the critical feedback on your work from somebody you trust. Yes.
How does WGN program your morning news? How do they determine what stories are being pursued and land that out?
Yeah, I mean, some people refer to the media as this like monolithic thing. Like, I don't talk to anybody at Channel 7. You may see the same stories on Channel 7, Channel 5, Channel 2, but we have a sense of what news is. And it's the producers in the newsroom and the anchors and the reporters all talking about, well, what's new, what's unique, what are the problems out there today. and we may have differing opinions on what's more important than something else, but you know, that's part of the conversation.
One thing I've noticed is, compared to British television, when they have interviews, so often American news people do not follow up with the question. They allow the person to say whatever they
Yeah.
say in a soundbite, and then it stops.
Well,
And the
yeah.
English, more often than not, will ask a second question,
Yeah.
a third question.
some of that depends on context. So I know that on the morning show, as an example, we know people watch 23 minutes. I'm not doing a 6-hour morning show. I'm doing a bunch of 23 minutes at a time. So that's why the weather is constant, the news and the weather and the traffic, and then I make a joke and then I keep going and going and going. And so if I have a politician on for 4 minutes and I sort of know he doesn't want to answer a question that I have to ask, I know he's going to run out the clock, right? Maybe I can stretch it to 5. I can't stretch it to 9. And there are only so many times I can ask. And I always tell viewers, you should read into his or her non-answer. That tells you something. Now, what you may be watching on BBC is maybe they taped it. And if I love taping interviews with politicians, because then I can hammer them over and over and over and over, and they know they can't get away. And so at some point, they're going to have to answer the question with something. And really, they're getting bad advice. I think Kinzinger's done a good job of answering. Kinzinger answers the question, right? And others just give you some vague talking point and they just run out the clock. At some point, you got to move on, right? And so I think that's part of what's happening.
Yeah, is there any way to just stop you and say, it's almost the clock?
No.
It's not about-
I have said on the air in the course of an interview, that's not the question I asked you, or you haven't answered the question. But at some point, you have to move on. Yeah.
Everybody's so polite.
Yeah. Well, nobody's ever said that of me. At least not in interviews. Yes.
What's the profile? What's the motivation profile, people profile, people talk to, A, and B, who's influencing the kids that are 10 to 15?
Who are influencing kids who are 10 to 15? In what way? Well, that's probably TikTok.
Well, that's a whole bunch of things. So how is that? That's, if you ask me what's my concern, it's more about the 10 to 15. This generation, we may
Sure.
not be smart enough, but we're old enough and the curtain is going to drop at some point in time.
Sure.
But, you know, we now look at 2 generations, kids from 10 to 15. What's influencing them? So it's TikTok and social media or bullying.
It is.
It's this.
And back to social media, and this is not my expertise, but the founders of social media thought they were doing a good thing. Hey, we're going to put a like button, and people say they had no idea what they were creating, this monster. And so we were our daughters were the last kids in their class to have a phone, which I think was 6th grade, or maybe it was 7th, but I know for a fact that they were the last ones in their class to have a phone. At some point, yeah, I mean, you say, well, parents should parent, but if you've ever had kids with a phone, it's not as easy as it sounds. And there needs to be some restrictions on social media. I don't have the answer because that's not my expertise, but yeah, it concerns me. It concerns me.
Follow up on that, not exactly, but when I was growing up, you would get the news in the afternoon paper that was delivered at some point in time.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I don't know if the world is really moving in the wrong direction, or we just get all the information so much quicker, so much more often. So, I mean, with the internet, with the cell phone, whatever happens, you basically have it in 5 minutes. You may do a follow-up and make it more broadly, but everybody knows within 5 minutes. I mean, I can pull out my phone right now and I can tell you.
They do. And I'll just tell you, a conversation that sometimes gets had in the newsroom on the fly is somebody will say, well, look, this is on Twitter. This is on, look at this. I said, but that doesn't mean it's right. I'd rather be right than first. And so, yeah, there's a lot of pressure on us because of that. And the thing is, there are no repercussions for whatever website or something that throws something out there and they're wrong. Well, who are those people? Who are, what does it cost to put up a website? It costs nothing. Yeah, we have traditional media, whatever you want to call it. We got a lot of money invested. We got a lot at stake. We have a lot of tradition. So we take it very seriously. That's it.
I just want to
Yeah.
highlight that. I think that's so important because you also have liability. What I think is different is the owners of platforms and social media, unlike Catholic
Mhm.
where like there is no accountability for what is on the platform. Definitionally,
Yeah.
that's what I said. We are open platforms, and we take no responsibility for what is on the platform.
Yeah.
I don't think it's been in history, going back to printing press, whatever, you own the platform, you own the responsibility. This is
Right.
new, and I'm not sure we know
Yeah.
as a society how to cope with powerful platforms that are unaccountable for
Right.
what's on the platform.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that answers the question about Twitter.
Right, and this, not my expertise, but yeah, the technology like Twitter has always said, well, I'm just a technology tool, I'm not a utility. I don't know. That's for somebody smarter than me to figure out. But in the terms of business for news, I've worked for some companies that took journalism seriously. News is a business, but we're not making widgets. What we do is important. And so we need to be doing more investigative reporting, and that takes money. And without naming any names, there are some broadcasting businesses that care nothing but the ledger and their stock price and so on. And that's not good for society either. Yes.
No, and your point is an interesting one about people not, about whoever, entities not taking responsibility. I think back to when Bob and I went to the Lincoln Museum
Mhm.
in Springfield. And there's a whole room of press coverage
Yeah.
of Lincoln and his
Right.
opponents and what, and they are just as ugly and vitriolic as can be.
Yeah.
And so my first thought was, there's nothing new under
Right.
the sun here.
Right.
It's what's happening now, was happening back in the 1850s, the 1860s.
It was happening in the 1700s too.
Part of the point, yes.
Yeah.
Part of the point is no one has any responsibility for it anymore. And so.
Well, yeah, that was part of the marketplace. And then the marketplace does change, but yeah, in the 1700s, newspapers were severely partisan. It was part of the game. That's that was their life.
So it's not new.
No, it's not.
It's faster.
It's
Yeah.
faster.
I wonder how you get from Brokaw and the things that we grew up with,
Mhm.
the people that we really look to deliver news, and what we get now, which is like a completely different thing.
So
It's
that's,
so
yeah.
well read to figure out what they're doing on the news now.
Mhm.
And the fact that they slant it to whatever sort of topical, I mean, you could turn on one channel and another channel, all things, virtually, if you don't go to opinion stuff.
Yeah, I don't know that that's changed that much. I will tell you this with Walter Cronkite. And everybody loves Walter Cronkite, and I will tell you what his defense was of the concept of liberal media. He would say challenging authority is a liberal value. Well, who are conservative? Well, that they're CEOs, Wall Street, military, police. And so, yeah, to challenging authority, if that's a liberal value, small L, I think, again, back to the beginning of my speech, I think people forget that's what we're supposed to be doing. So you're suggesting that David Muir and Lester Holt are not as well read as Brokaw and Jennings. I don't know that. I don't know them, so I don't know that that's true. I don't know that it's demonstrated one way or the other when they're doing their 30 minutes of reading the teleprompter. It wasn't like Peter Jennings was ad-libbing breaking news every day.
More than any media has lost its trust. Whether or not they were as honest one way or another, but the trust issue is really, you sat there and you listened to these people and you trusted the news.
Yeah.
Now you look, well, what are they trying to
Well, I don't know what's less trustworthy about Muir or Lester Holt compared to Jennings or Brokaw, but I will tell you this difference. When I watch ABC News at 5:30, and I think those network newscasts are pretty good and pretty solid, but ABC News, it's like watching Good Morning America from 30 years ago. I mean, there's like 4 minutes of weather. Like, when did I ever need weather from Tom Brokaw? Like, I have weather on my phone. I don't need it from a national newscast. And they're doing that because it's cheap, easy fill, instead of covering the hard news in overseas, which they're doing because Ukraine is a big deal. But in general, in normal times, day to day, they really were not. They're filling it with weather. They're filling it with other stuff. So in that sense, that's probably, and when you watch ABC, you'll see in their reporter packages, instead of video, you'll see lots of Getty photographs. Why? That's easier. That's cheaper. Everything is easier and cheaper in that sense. But I don't think, listen, there's no secret meeting about, okay, we got to slant the news this way or that way. I don't think much of that has changed. The biggest change is because of the cost, news directors are hiring. You can get into Chicago with 2 years experience instead of 5. You can be the anchor in Tulsa in 2 years instead of 5. And so I think I don't want my news from a 25-year-old. I just don't. But so to your point, I think to be a good anchor, you should be a good reporter and you should put in your time. But some of that is dictated by the business element of our business. Yes.
Larry, who do you admire today?
Well, the first person who comes to mind isn't in the business anymore. Some of you may remember him. He lives in Winnetka. His name is Mike Leonard. He was a feature reporter for the Today Show and a great writer. I think some of the network reporters do a great job. I think, gosh, his name is escaping me, but I watch the network news. I think the reporters do a pretty decent job. They still hire good reporters. Yes, they're hiring some of them a little bit younger, but there is no, oh my goodness, this god of journalism that maybe some of us grew up with when there were 3 channels. And that's, I think, part of that issue. Yes.
This is a lighter question, but as I shared, I love WGN, and part of it is just, I know you have a traditional approach, but yet the morning news, it seems that you all have hit upon just a great way of delivering it. And I think other news channels try and mimic
Oh,
what
yeah.
you guys have. How was that purposeful, or did that just kind of come together?
Yeah, it was. You could see when we started to have rating success, some news director went to the anchors at the other stations and said, "Be funny." And I said, if you're not funny off the air, you're not going to be funny on the air. But news was always so sterile and kind of fake, and even the morning show, the network morning shows have not changed in 40 years. It's just the go-to ad lib on every newscast in America is the news anchor chastising the weatherman because it's raining. It's not funny. It's never going to be funny. It's not clever. And so I never, ever talk to the weather person about the weather. And that's how this segment, Larry's World, got started, in that I would just write some kind of funny essay, and then we'd have something to talk about. And the problem is, as we were talking earlier, it's not really in the DNA of news anchors to be self-deprecating. But we were just like regular people who happened to be thrown together, and we were like brothers and sisters. And we were the last ones on the air in terms of a morning show in this market. And we just said what was on our mind. And when a segment was terrible, we'd say, that's terrible. And our whole business model was breaking the rules. So we would talk about the other TV stations, which was like a no-no. And what we would do, we would say, oh, the management at Channel 7, they're just evil people. But we would say nice things about the individuals, because otherwise that would be a cheap shot. So we started to learn that all the other TV stations watched our morning show because they wanted to see if we would talk about them. Well, once a narcissist, always a narcissist. So yeah, it's just who we are. And during the commercial breaks, it's just more of that dark sarcasm, or as I like to say, it's like the 40 jokes that we recycle every week. But it's worked, and it's been successful. And you can't do it unless you get the right people together. And you can't be afraid to laugh at yourself. Yes, David.
With live interviews, things can go haywire. And how do you handle that? I'm thinking of an example of Dave Garrett when he came on.
Yeah, he came on and I think he was stoned, the Kung Fu guy, and he dropped the F-bomb in the first 10 seconds of the interview, and I just ended it. I said, sorry, it's nice to see you. We're done. And I think, you know, most news anchors, when something goes wrong, it's like if you've seen broadcast news or any of these other shows that movies about, like they start to sweat and they shuffle their papers like clear their cough. Like, just call for, everybody can see what's happening. It's a giant mess show. Just call it. That's what it is. And then it just lets the tension out of the room. Like our audio board went down. It's a big, I bet none of you have ever seen that happen in a newscast in America, ever. Our audio board went down. And so the control room's panicking and they're running commercials. And I was like, don't want commercials, get us back on the air. Let us talk about this. And we just held up signs and blamed Channel 7 or whatever we did. And until the audio came back on, and it was a viral moment, and people still talk about how we handled that. So it's just, I know it's become this corporate buzzword has been authenticity, and like we were doing that from the very beginning. That's all I know, and it's worked, and I think it's refreshing. And I would do, if I was anchoring a nighttime news at Channel 7, I would do it the same way. So, yes.
What is the future of TV journalism, given the fact that so many of our kids get their news, good or bad,
Well,
mostly bad, from, they don't watch the news.
No, but 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds were never watching the news unless it happened to be on and your parents are in the room or whatever. So at some point they're going to have kids and it'll be more convenient for them, I think, to put on the news. But again, even with adults, the numbers at night, way down. And well, across the board, they're way down. But at least in the morning, it's the one time that it's more difficult to be on your phone. Again, if you're just reading headlines at a card table with a clock over your shoulder like they did in 1975, you're probably not going to get very far in this business, and that's not what we do. So I feel good about what we're doing, and hopefully I can do it for a little bit longer. Yes.
Larry, the backstories. So where does that go from here? I thought they were very creative. Piece of history.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, I was hoping News Nation would, maybe put it nationally, and so, but they're up to their necks putting this national newscast on. They're trying to do this national newscast. So I'm just trying to tap dance and create content and keep this show alive and see what happens to it. I love doing it. It takes a long time. It's only two of us doing it. And I just got back from Tulsa doing the Tulsa Massacre and the murder of the Osage. If you don't know, they were moved and moved and moved, and they ended up on land with oil, and they became the wealthiest people in the world per capita, and then they became the most murdered people on the world per capita. So I'm doing that story, and then came back from the Ozark, doing a story about a con man at a hotel. So it's fun stuff. Some things like the Salem witch trials you know a little bit about, and other things you don't know anything about. So if you know somebody that's at HBO or something, we'd love to do it. I love doing this more than I love anchoring.
So are you doing this within Newsday or within Next Star or something?
It's just on WGN. On the new episodes, I do about 12 a year. So I'll usually do like 8 in the fall and 4 in the spring, or vice versa. So that's about as much as I can crank out with Mike D'Angelo, my photographer. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for coming. I'm sure Larry will